I like New World, I really do. But that doesn't mean I don't have issues with the game, and I think everybody that's playing it should have issues with the game. Because it's not perfect by any means. There's a lot of bugs. There's some that are game breaking, there's some that are being unfair for the balance, there's exploits, there's a lot of things that are currently kind of destroying the game. Yes, I'm confident that in the future they'll be taken care of, but I do hope it's not a too little too late type scenario. That all being said, I have one main issue with New World, and it's not relevant to any of these things. It's actually more of a game design choice. Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome. My name is CodeYo. I make survival, crafting, and MMO content. If you like what you see or hear, please do consider dropping a sub or a like, or any love messages down below. He gets the idea. Let's get into it. So, this is different from my usual video. Usually I'm making guides or I'm making storytelling type commentary, but I was just thinking to myself that there's something preventing me from really getting into New World. And I think a big component that's lacking for me is the combat. And I know that this is going to be one that's very debate worthy for a lot of people, and it's very opinion heavy. I get what they're trying to do with the combat. I get that it's supposed to be more basic attack focused, more about your combos, more about the combos and less about the abilities that you're spamming or using, but that doesn't mean that you can't have depth there still, or that you can't have crossover. And I was thinking about it because while I've been playing this game, the honeymoon phase is starting to wear off for me, and so now I'm starting to be more critical on the actual mechanics of the game. And one of those things for me was combat. You quickly learn a lot of the things that the combat has to offer, and then it kind of flatlines. Once you've figured out your combos, once you've figured out everybody else's abilities and combos, you know when to use abilities, you know when to attack or dodge or block. And yes, you can still get a lot of fun out of that for a long time in PvP, because no PvP fight's going to be exactly the same, but that doesn't mean that we can't have more depth, or that we don't deserve more depth. Recently, I made a video talking about ArcAge and ArcAge Unchained and how Cacao Games is going to be the new publisher moving forward. All that news aside, it got me thinking about ArcAge. One of my favorite things about ArcAge was the class system. I think it has one of the best class systems I've ever played. The way that ArcAge's class system works is that you have 11 different class sets or skill sets, but every single person can choose 3. Doesn't matter what 3 you want, you can mix and match them as you please. And each one of those trees had a lot of different abilities, and you didn't get to choose all of them. You had a limited amount of skill points to spend overall. It wasn't like 5 per tree or 10 per tree, it was just a set number overall. And with the ability to change any of these classes within your selected 3, you had 220 possible classes or class combinations to pick from. Of course, a lot of them were going to be a lot more viable or meta than others, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't still do a lot of crazy cool things when it came to theory crafting and mix and matching builds. With that, there were abilities that had certain debuffs or effects that could then be triggered into an effect or an ability from a different tree entirely. Like you could have Witchcraft and Battle Rage going together, so you're some sort of melee attacking, heavy armor wielding guy who all of a sudden has these giant waves flowing out from him, and things just comboed. There were actually effect combos, and while it's a tab targeting system, which probably allows for a lot more depth with these kind of systems, it makes me miss it. Because the level of depth that we were able to get from combat and class combinations was kind of astounding. And thinking about it, it wasn't necessarily that we had all these classes, right? It's not the fact that we had 11 skill sets to choose from, it was the fact that we had ways to synergize every skill set with another skill set. And that's something that I think New World really lacks. Right now, if I see somebody and they have a hatchet and they have a great axe, when I look at that person, I don't really think of them as a hatchet great axe user. For the most part, if the hatchet's out, I think of them as a hatchet user. And then when they swap to the great axe, they're now a great axe user. There's not a lot of synergy between weapons. And of course, there are some things that occur, some things that do carry over, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of slack for saying that, because people will say things like, oh, well, you can place down this AoE and then swap weapons, and now you're having a different weapon in your hand. Okay, that's super cool, but that's not really deep, right? There's not a lot of crossover. And part of this is that our passives don't transfer over when we swap weapons. Personally, I think that's a massive mistake. I think that passives 100% should cross over and carry over to your other weapon, but they should be then rebalanced to accommodate that. Right now, if passives carried over, it would be broken. I agree, but the system was not made with that in mind. I think that the system itself should allow for more synergy, more crossing over, and be rebalanced from that moving forward. I don't think we're going to see that, and it's a really big bummer, but I think it would be awesome. I think having things even like the Hatchet Ultimate, where you can deny death every, 90 seconds? Something like that for a few seconds. I think that would be really, really cool to utilize while in a different weapon. People will say, like, that's broken, that's overpowered. It's only overpowered if you don't balance it, right? That sounds powerful, of course, but it also sounds fun. It sounds engaging. It sounds like it can create more synergy with more builds. What if instead of worrying about things being overpowered in that sense, we made things more fun and then balanced them? If somebody's running at me with a sword and shield and they have a hatchet, my brain instantly goes, oh, that person's going to be really, really hard to kill. And then even if I do kill them, they're then going to negate death for 3 seconds, right? Because the sword and shield tree has a lot of damage reduction, a lot of fortify, a lot of things to make them take less damage and to stay alive longer. The hatchet has the deny death. It also has the berserk mode, so you're healing. Now, what if I used berserk, went to my sword and shield, and use, I forget what ability it is, but after like 15 seconds, you heal a portion of your health. Now, when I see a sword and shield hatchet user, I am thinking of all these crazy combinations that is so specific to this exact build. I'm thinking of this different, unique playstyle that this player is going to present. He's no longer a hatchet user when he has a hatchet and a sword user when he has a sword out. He is this hybrid combo, and I now have to think of all the different passive combinations he might have and how I'm going to fight against them. And I think that's way more fun. I think having the ability to mix our passives would create such a deep layer for combat that I think it's worth it. I think it is worth doing that and then going in and balancing it. Even like the Ice Gauntlet Ultimate, right? Ultimate Chilled increases the damage that the target receives from frost damage after being dealt damage by a frost ability, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. How cool would it be to have an Ice Gauntlet at all times, have that passive, but then you're walking around with an Ice Great Axe, right? That thing scales with intelligence, is doing frost damage, and you're just going around whacking people with it, dealing frost damage and proccing your ultimate chill, which is going to deal more damage. I think that's crazy. That's a layer of depth that we don't have right now. Right now, combat just feels so vanilla to me. And honestly, it's a massive letdown. After the initial phase of loving this game is wearing off, this is the one thing that's keeping me from wanting to hop back in, is that I don't get my theory crafting. I don't get to wonder about all these amazing combinations of all these crazy cool things I could do. I miss that. In Arcade, this is something that I would spend hours doing, just thinking of all these amazing class combinations and these intricate synergies I could do, and all trying to think of things that nobody else had discovered yet, and then I could present it in a battleground. My favorite memory was I would mix witchcraft with occultism. And there's this ability in witchcraft where you put your opponent in a bubble and they start to float up. There's an ability in occultism which force pushes your opponent away from you. Fall damage exists. So what I used to do, I can't remember the third class I had, but what I used to do is I would bubble my opponent, I would get underneath them, wait for the bubble to rise them a little bit. Before it popped, I would jump and force push them into the air, and they would fall and take fall damage. That was the bulk of my damage in 1v1 PvP, and it was overwhelmingly effective. And the amount of times that I would get private messages afterwards going, holy shit, I've never seen that before. That was really cool. It was fun. That was a layer of depth that we're not getting in New World. And I get it. It's a different game. And this is just my opinion. But I think that my biggest problem with New World isn't the bugs. It's none of these things that can get fixed. Whether or not they do get fixed is a different story. But the fact is they can be fixed, right? I don't know if we're going to get enough combat tweaks to get to the point where the game is fun in that aspect. PvP will always be fun just because of PvP, but it's going to get dry, right? There's only so many abilities that we're going to see in PvP. There's only so many combinations that we're going to see. If you see an Ice Storm, you don't care what their other weapon is because it's Ice Storm. It's not affected by anything else, right? If you see a Pillar of Fire, it doesn't matter. You know exactly what's going on in that Pillar of Fire, right? But what if you saw somebody throw a Gravity Well and their other weapon happened to be an Ice Gauntlet, and they have a gem that's converting some of that damage to ice? Now you're thinking, oh man, they might have the ultimate chill passive, and so if I step in that, I'm probably going to receive frost damage as well, and there's a really good chance that it's going to deal extra damage because of ultimate chill. It's just a layer of depth that I really, really wish was there. Just so many crazy combinations that we're never going to see because the game's limited itself. And I think about it, and then I compare it to a game like Elder Scrolls Online, which is not my favorite game by any means, but it makes me respect the way that they handle their action bars more. that game is oftentimes being considered very similar to the way that New World handles combat. You have 2 weapon slots and you can swap between them, and when you swap between them, it changes your action bar. The difference there is that when you swap your weapon, your action bar and the way that you are is not only tied to your weapon. Elder Scrolls Online has a bunch of different things that contribute to your class. You could be a necromancer, but be running no necromancer abilities, right? You could only be running necromancer passives because there are racial abilities that are tied to weapons, and none of these are exclusive to your class. You can power up your two-handed sword tree all the way and just run two-handed sword abilities while you have it out, then swap to a staff, and then just have staff abilities. You could have nothing that's relevant to your class, or you could have everything relevant to your class. The point is there were options, and there were things that carried over. You could give yourself some sort of armor buff, swap to your other weapon, and then just tank it out for a little while if you needed to, and then when it kind of died down and it was time to heal up, swap and heal. There were all these things that carried over that just made the theory crafting such a huge part of that game. There are websites dedicated just to builds. And while we have those for New World, they're basic. They're not fun to look at. I don't need to look up a fire staff build. It's very clear what the best is. And even if they balance it, it's not like there's a lot of options. We've got 6 abilities per tree, and we can use 3 abilities per weapon at a time. This has just been a little rant. I don't know if I'm even going to upload it, but hey, if you're hearing this part, then well, I guess I did. I want to know what you guys think. This is personally what's kind of holding me back a little bit in New World. It's not even the things that are being talked about. It's not the bugs or the exploits or all the walking for me. It's none of that. It's the lack of depth in combat is really keeping me back, right? And even then, here we go again. Even then, people compare it to like, well, it's supposed to be like Souls-like combat. It's not though, right? The Souls series has so many different things that you can mix, match, and build that it's totally different. If we had that layer, then sure. But even then, in the Souls series, you can still mix match it at any given time. I can have cleric abilities and pyro abilities and then just quickly throw those over and they still transfer, right? I could be a fire guy or a great axe guy or whatever I want and then have a talisman in my offhand to give me some really cool buffs. There's synergy between those. Now, it would be different if I'm starting to heal myself or I'm doing some sort of ability and the second I swap to my great axe, it disappears. That would be New World. Because when you have a great axe out, you are only a great axe user. And when you have a hatchet out, you are only a hatchet user. And I think that just ruins a lot of potential for me. Well, that's all. I just was thinking about this and wanted to talk it out. I don't even know if I hit all the points I wanted to. This has just been a free flow thinking video, but that's all. Let me know what you guys think of the state of the game. I'm going to do a proper state of the game or my thoughts on the state of the game video later. But right now, I just wanted to get this one out. So let me know what you think. If you did like what you saw or heard, please do consider dropping a like or a sub or some sweet love down below. That's all for this video, guys. Peace.